knows how you come across somebody once in a while you shouldn't have messed with? That's me.
I am not an African American.
You're Oreo cookie, white in the inside and black on the outside.
I don't have an afro, I have an Amerifro.
Talking that idiotic stuff you talk about, I will slap you.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Black as the ace of spades, but 100% American.
Heard around the world by everybody and their mama. The Jesse Lee Peterson Radio Show.
Uniting the races with truth instead of dividing them with lies. We're also rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man. I am Jesse Lee Peterson. Welcome to the third hour of the Jesse Lee Peterson Radio Show. Thank you so much for being a part of it. This is Manhood Hour.
Big and bad enough. Are you gonna let them shoot you down?
That's right.
The evil flies and your brother cries. Are you gonna be around? Someone needs a friend just around the bend.
I have with me Dr. Leonard Sax, founder and executive director of the Nat'l Association for Single-Sex Public Education, better known as NASSPE. He served as a medical doctor at his own private practice for 18 years before return to study the issues of gender in education full-time. He's the author of Boys Adrift, The 5 Factors Driving the Growing Epidemic of Unmotivated Boys and Underachieving Young Men, which was published back in 2007 and expanded in 2009. And I wanted the doctor to come on to talk to us about what is going on with boys today and why the public education system failing boys. And we will take your calls on this issue at 888-77-53773. Dr. Sax, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. You were a medical doctor for 18 years. What got your attention concerning boys?
Yeah, I still am a medical doctor. I have an active medical license in Pennsylvania and Maryland.
Okay.
And I'm board certified in family practice. And I do my continuing education to maintain my board certification. But anyhow, indeed, I got into this because of what I was seeing in my own practice. I saw many, many, many families where there was a daughter and a son, and the daughter's working hard and getting good grades and cares about getting an A instead of a B, and the son is a goofball who's more interested in getting the next level in his video game than he is about getting an A instead of a B in Spanish. Same parents, same household, same resources. The daughter is motivated, working hard, and the son is goofing off. And I wondered, what is it about suburban Washington, D.C. that the boys are such goofballs? And I started to talk to people across the United States, and I found it's not just Washington area.
No.
It's all across the country.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if you're talking urban or rural. It doesn't matter if you're talking black or white. It doesn't matter if you're talking affluent or low income. Across the country, we see a growing gender gap in motivation. Now, it doesn't apply to every boy. There are some boys who are working hard, and there are some girls who are not. But on average, there's been a big, big change in this country. 40 years ago, women were more likely to drop out of college than men were, very often because they were getting married and starting a family.
Yes.
Today, young man in this country is much more likely than his sister is to drop out of college, and it's not because he's staying home to raise baby. It's often because he's gone back to his parents' home to play video games in the basement. So that's a big change, and I wanted to understand why that change occurred.
I have been, for the last 22 years, running a nonprofit organization where we are rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man. And I've noticed that grown men in their 30s and 40s are sitting at home playing the video games or listening to a headset with music all day long. They have lost that sense of communication. They really don't know how to move forward, and it's very interesting to see that. In your book, you talk about 5 main factors that are making boys unmotivated. Number 1 is video games.
Actually, number one is changes in education, the way that the educational system changed in the last 30 years.
And how did it change, and why?
Well, it changed because good people with good intentions responded to pressures on them in ways that seemed rational that had the unintended consequence of disengaging many boys. So I'll give you an example. That one factor, changes in education, has four components, one of which is schools became unfriendly to boys. So what do I mean by that? Well, I attended public school, K through 12, in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. I attended Lomond Elementary School in Shaker Heights, Ohio, K through 6. And, we get a lot of snow near Cleveland because it's right on Lake Erie. And I remember all through the winter months when there's a lot of snow on the ground, which is most of the time, we'd go out at lunchtime, we'd get our coats on, go out on the playground, on the blacktop, which is right out on the school property, and we'd throw snowballs at each other, and the teachers would come out and join us. It used to be okay for boys to throw snowballs at one another on school property, but now it's not. Now, why did that change happen? It happened because of liability. 50 years ago, if two kids were throwing snowballs and one of them hit the other one in the eye and the other kid got an eye injury, 50 years ago, the parents did not sue the school. But today they would. So that's why that change happened. And I understand that. And I understand concern about liability. Again, I'm a medical doctor, and I understand concern about getting sued. But there's a better way to deal with that problem, which I first learned at St. Andrews, a school just north of Toronto, Ontario. They have a real simple rule. If you want to throw snowballs, go to the football field, which is on school property. But if you don't want snowballs thrown at you, then don't go to the football field, inbounds and out of bounds. And we have deployed this strategy at many schools across the United States with no problems. Now, people say, okay, well, that's a very trivial issue. Who really cares about snowballs? But it is emblematic of a lot of things that have happened in schools, public schools and private schools. Boys doing things that boys have always done, like throwing snowballs at each other, or pointing fingers and saying, bang, bang, you're dead, or drawing a picture of a sword, or writing a first-person combat narrative. Boys doing things boys have always done now gets you in trouble. I'll give you one.
And it's natural.
Example.
It comes natural to us. It's not like something that they're making up. It's just what boys do.
And it's...
Let me take a break, Doctor. We come back and finish that story. Back in a moment.
It's like the more you give, the more.
That's right. Manhood Hour. I am Jesse Lee Peterson. We got to get to your calls at 888-77-53-773, 888-77-JESSE. Doctor, you were talking about, you gave us an example of a boy who was expelled from school.
No, suspended.
Suspended from school. Finish your story.
Yeah. So anyhow, this boy was suspended because he wrote a story, a first-person combat narrative. And this story, when the parents shared it with me, really struck a chord because I wrote a very similar story myself. My mother died September 2008. I was going through her papers, and she had kept an award that was sent to me by NCTE, the National Council of Teachers of English. When I was at Shaker Heights High in 1977, I'd been invited to compete, to sit in a competition, proctored room, where you write a story in a limited amount of time, and they send it into the headquarters, and a few weeks later, I got this prize. In my story, I imagined East Germans escaping to West Germany, crossing a minefield, and I described one of them stepping on a mine and blowing both his legs off, and and crawling as blood is pouring out of his pelvis, crawling towards West Germany as he dies, and I got the highest award. This boy, writing a very similar story, really, gets suspended from school. Boys doing things they have always done now gets you in trouble.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to accommodate this. The rule is inbounds and out of bounds. Just like that school in Ontario, inbounds, generic violence is allowed. Generic violence means violence which is intrinsic to that genre. If you're writing a first-person combat narrative, people are going to get killed. More than 50 million people died in World War II. But personal and threatening violence is out of bounds. So if Jason writes a story about bringing a knife to school to stab Tyrone, and there is a boy named Tyrone at the school who's been making fun of him, that's not allowed. That's personal. That's threatening. Boys understand inbounds versus out of bounds. It is very easy to make the school friendly to boys, without making it unfriendly to girls. You just need to have teachers and administrators who understand these issues. And unfortunately, most of them do not. And the result is boys doing things boys have always done. Throwing snowballs now gets you in trouble. A lot of boys develop a bad attitude towards school very early. And I've talked to 6-year-old boys, 7-year-old boys, 8-year-old boys in school across this country, and they say they hate school. Why do you hate school? Well, I got in trouble just because Jason and me were throwing snowballs. And the boys have a deep sense that this is wrong. Girls doing things girls always do, they don't get in trouble. But boys doing things that boys have always done now gets you in trouble. Now, race plays a factor here. So a white boy writes this story, he probably doesn't get suspended. An African-American male writes the same story, he is at least twice as likely to get suspended. We now have very good data on this. Two boys doing the same thing, if it's an African-American male, he's much more likely to face disciplinary action, and that is true whether the teacher is white or black.
And why is that?
Well, it's what I call institutional racism. And I use the term institutional because I don't want people to take it personally. When I say the American educational system is racist, I'm not saying that these teachers themselves don't like black people. A lot of them are black people. But we have this institutional racism where if an African-American male draws a picture of a sword or describes a story where somebody gets killed, that African-American male much more likely to be suspended or disciplined than a white boy who writes the same story. We have very good data on this.
When you say based on racism, is it simply because the person is black?
Well, household income has a lot to do with it, too. If an African-American from an affluent home and lives in a big mansion in a affluent neighborhood, again, he's less likely to get in trouble than an African-American male from a low-income neighborhood. So race and household income each have an effect, and the African-American male in the low-income neighborhood has a very high risk. If he does anything out of line, even if he just points his finger at his friend and says, bang, bang, you're dead, if he is an African-American male from a low-income neighborhood, he's much more likely to face disciplinary action than he would if he were in an affluent neighborhood or if he were white.
But I think, Doctor, it has nothing to do with the fact that he's black at all. I think that it has mostly to do with the fact that he's coming from a single-parent home. And in today's America, we all are aware that these children who are coming from single-parent homes are more likely to commit crimes. They are more likely to become disobedient to the teachers or the authority figure because they're angry. They have anger that is coming from the home. And so these black teachers who are suspending these, and white teachers who are suspending these black kids are not doing it because they are black, but they know the potential of violence there because they're already angry. But those black kids that are in upper-class family, they are more likely to have a father and a mother in the homes, and they're less violent.
You know, that's what I thought, too, when I started out to understand this about 10 years ago. Because the big question I was asking is, look, 50 years ago, boys in this country thought academic achievement was a good thing. 50 years ago, Sam Cooke had a #1 hit song in this country. He sang, "Don't Know Much About History." He sang, now, I don't claim to be an A student, he sang, but I'm trying to be, because maybe by being an A student, baby, I could win your love for me. He goes on to mention French, geometry, and trigonometry as subjects in which he's going to try harder to get an A instead of a B, because he believes that by getting an A instead of a B, he will raise his status in the eyes of the pretty girl. 50 years ago, we had a culture in which it was cool for a boy to get A's in school.
That's right.
But we no longer have that culture. You cannot imagine Akon or 50 Cent or Eminem writing a song about how they're going to work harder on their geometry quiz to get an A instead of a B. You know, Akon
That's amazing.
Sort of gone from a culture in which young men wanted to believe they were scholars working hard to get an A instead of a B to a culture in which young men want you to believe they're convicted felons or gang members, even if they're not. So I was trying to understand, why did this happen? What changed in the last 50 years? Of course, one thing that changed, 50 years ago, boy was much more likely to be raised in a home with a father than he is today.
Hold that thought, Doctor.
I was sure that was going to be one of the factors.
I got to take a break. 888-775-3773. Back in a moment.